Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
Okay, so this episode, listeners, has a lot. So I have a lot of emotions and feelings right now, and as the administration continues to attack the citizens and residents and everybody else and then some without due process or as if they're, not human, it's been hard to work out these emotions and feelings. So since I have a mic and platform, thank you, Anney, I thought I would try to work them out with you, Anney, and our listeners.
Yeah, thank you, listeners.
Yes, we're going to do this as a journey. Content warning, yes, this is about world issues, racism, death, immigration, all the things, even adoption. I put a little sprinkle of adoption stuff in here. And I'm going to timestamp it. It is October 9th, 2025. I had to look at a calendar because days, what are the days? I thought it was the end of October. Who knows? At the same time, I thought it was, August. What is this?
Temporal distortion. We did an episode on it.
Yes. But all that to say, today is October 9th, 2025. And I swear to God, this really has been the longest year ever.
Yeah, it's been quite long.
But with that, again, we talk about all kinds of problems and issues in the world. But today we're focusing on Asian topics. And though we're going to use sources in different research, I will also be putting into my own personal experiences and thoughts. And yeah, I am only one person with one opinion and one experience. And there are a lot of things happening. So with all of that, know that, yes, again, peppered with my opinions, this is a biased conversation. And for the most part, we try to keep it at least research focused. And there's a lot of research. Again, we want to talk about that. And a lot of stats. But I do have thoughts and opinions as an Asian American woman that is a naturalized citizen since the age of 14. And like I said, got a lot of opinions. But with all of that, there's a lot of things happening when it comes to issues. Asia is a continent, a giant continent. So it's a big amount of space with lots of different communities, with a lot of diversity and cultures. So even though I'm focusing in saying the terms Asian American, it is going to be pretty broad and spread out. Of course, as a South Korean, I am a little more focused in on that Eastern Asian conversation. And yeah, there's a lot that's happened personally in the state of Georgia with South Korea, as you may already know. But with that, we are also focusing on Asian American communities or immigrants are coming into the community and how they're affected or how the U.S. is seen by the Asian community or how the Asian community is seen by the U.S. But before we do all that, let's talk about Asian American history. The history of Asian Americans, it's not something that's taught it was not taught in my school. I knew very little to none. In fact, the little I know of it is due to things of social media, my own research, and literature. East of Eden, which is one of my favorite books, was one of the better renditions of an Asian character named Lee, who was portrayed as the secret moral compass and intellect in the story. I think there's so many reasons why I love that story, that fiction. But his portrayal from such an author, like from way back when, was so significant and nude me to see that wasn't really, it was kind of tongue-in-cheek about the racism at that point. Like they talk about pigeon speak and all of that. But he was the moral center to this conversation. Like Adam, one of the main characters, often conversed with him. Like he was seen as that. So it was interesting to know that. And this was during everything that was happening in California with like gold rush and such, kind of in that center, but way back when, But we're going to go through this with the help of history.com, who gave us a bit of a timeline and our little summary from it. So it goes as this. In the mid-1800s, we have the gold rush, which brought a lot of Chinese miners to the California coast. According to the Library of Congress, we have around 25,000 Chinese laborers arriving to be met with a lot of discrimination and hostility. And with that, they would soon be a part of the Transcontinental Railroad workforce. So they'd initially come in and try to get gold. That didn't work out because no one wanted to share. No one wanted to give them any access, whatnot. So they did a lot of the work, including the Transcontinental Railroad. In 1875, the Racist, Sexist, and Fetishizing Page Act was enacted. This prohibited the use and recruitment of Asian people, or Oriental, as they put it, who were brought for, quote, lead and immoral purposes. Here we have the conversation of Asian women being brought as prostitutes and allowing for the degradation and humiliation of Chinese and other Asian women. And also, this was also in part to make sure to separate Asian families. There was a lot in America. In 1882, we had the Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned Chinese immigrants from entering the country and also made sure to deny citizenship. This lasted until 1943. Yeah, you guessed it. When they decided the Japanese were way worse because, we need to pit people against each other, and they also needed more soldiers. Yeah.
In 1885, the courts allowed for all students to have access to public education thanks to the Mammy Tape case, an American-born Chinese girl versus the San Francisco Board of Education.
Right. In 1885 through 1917, we have a whole history of targeted attacks against Asian coal miners with the deaths of many Asian people and injuries with absolutely no justice. And of course, more congressional policies barring Asian immigrants or even quarantine and imprisoning them for long periods of time. So they literally had like Ellis Island, but on the West Coast, that just kept Asian people there for a long amount of time. And speaking of which, 1941, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, we have the internment camp, which imprisoned over 120,000 Japanese Americans, which impacted their livelihoods and so much more. BT dubs, they have reconstructed this area to have a ICE encampment. So, yay. It wasn't until 1957 there was an Asian American, Indian American, and Sikh in Congress. Dilip Singh from California is sworn in as U.S. representative who was about civil rights and desegregation at the time. Love to see it.
In 1965, the first Asian American woman and first woman of color, Patsy T. Mink of Hawaii, who was sworn in as a U.S. House representative.
Since then, progress has ebbed and flowed, and as I think most people have noticed, yes, we have had the push for unions and better work conditions, acceptance with AAIP Heritage Week, and even extended to a month, to coming back around with pushbacks with anti-Asian rhetoric to divides between marginalized people. So what I'm saying in general is that things progressed, things got better, then things are now in a stalemate. And we know one of the favorite things of white supremacy is pitting marginalized people against each other, and the Asian people were probably at the top in this narrative. So that brings us to the model minority myth. This is what we're talking about. The term was first introduced in 1966 thanks to sociologist William Peterson, who wrote an article titled Successful Story, Japanese American Style for the New York Times Magazine. There's a couple of features on New York Times magazines which seem to really love this conversation, by the way. Anyway, the theory essentially pits one marginalized group against another in its incorrect stereotyping of Asian Americans or Asian people in general, Asian immigrants. And NBC News defined it as this, quote, a persistent stereotype that paints Asian Americans as inherently successful and problem-free, particularly in contrast to other minority groups. Yeah, no, you see what I'm saying? Yeah, okay. So, of course, this has only strengthened white supremacy, which is the point, which is what we're saying. From a 2017 article from NPR written by Kat Chow titled Model Minority Myth, again used as a racial wedge between Asians and Blacks, she writes, the article is referencing another article that was not well received within the Asian community, which seemed to only uphold the model minority myth. Sullivan's comments showcase a classic and tenacious conservative strategy, Janelle Wong, the director of Asian American Studies at the University of Maryland, College Park, said in an email. This strategy, she says, involves, quote, 1, ignoring the role that selective recruitment of highly educated Asian immigrants have played in Asian American success, followed by 2, making a flawed comparison between Asian Americans and other groups, particularly Black Americans, to argue that racism, including more than 2 centuries of Black enslavement, can be overcome by hard work and strong family values. There's so many things to this narrative that makes me want to throw a computer. So the article further explains the way Peterson, the person, again, who coined this infuriating term, really laid out the groundwork to these divisions. Quote, it solidified a prevailing stereotype of Asians as industrious and rule-abiding that would stand in direct contrast to African Americans who were still struggling against bigotry, poverty, and a history rooted in slavery. In the opening paragraphs, Peterson quickly puts African Americans and Japanese Americans at odds. Asked which of the country's ethnic minorities has been subjected to the most discrimination and the worst injustices, very few persons would even think of answering the Japanese Americans. Yet, if the question refers to persons alive today, that may well be the correct reply. Like the Black people, the Japanese have been the object of color prejudice. When new opportunities, even equal opportunities, are opened up, the minority's reaction to them is likely to be negative. Either self-defeating apathy or a hatred so all-consuming as to be self-destructive. For the well-meaning programs and countless scholarly studies now focused on the Black people, we barely know how to repair the damage that the slave traders started. The history of Japanese Americans, however, challenges every such generalization about ethnic minorities. But as history shows, Asian Americans were afforded better jobs, not simply because of educational attainment, but in part because they were treated better. So, by the way, look behind the curtains. I changed some of the terms because that big quote was from Peterson's article in the early days, in which they have politically incorrect terms for the Black community. But at that same time, it's obvious what he is trying to do in this comparison, and it is tactic number one for white supremacists. And once again, this is reinforcing that level of power. And this is kind of where that belief of like the Asian people really, really thinking they're better than, because they got a pat on the back from the main people in power. So, with a brief history of Asian Americans, what is happening today? Well, honestly, with the model minority myth still in full swing, with events such as the reversing of affirmative action, thanks in part to an Asian American who bought into the narrative to be in proximity of white men. Yes, with the help and backing of white men. The state of affairs is not great.
Nope. According to a lot of data, Asian immigrants' main reason for coming to the U.S. is all about the educational opportunities, either for them or for their family. According to Pew Research from October of 2024, they say 6 in 10 came for educational purposes or for economic purposes. And more than half of the Asian immigrants say there definitely need to be some major changes in immigration policies.
Interestingly, according to the same research, Democrats are more likely to help and increase Asian immigrant citizenship and green cards with programs such as DACA and more. And the amount of Asian Americans at that time registered as Republicans were higher than Democrats. But honestly, by a slight margin, still disheartening when you vote against your own interest.
Yeah. In other Pew research about how Asian immigrants live in the United States and why, many of them believe the U.S. has better opportunities for them and for their children. But interestingly, they believe that family ties and family importance is stronger in their country of origin.
Right. I mean, we've kind of talked about this in the way that the new generations, the millennials and now Gen Zers are still living with parents in a lot of the Asian communities, and that's the norm, that they do not leave until they are married themselves. And oftentimes the in-laws, especially if one is widowed, comes and live with them, stays with them. Like they have a duty to their parents. And that's not necessarily a really big thing in the U.S., although I feel like people are now getting closer to that. A lot of people moving back in and seeing those benefits of like less bills. So again, from that Pew research, quote, Asian Americans are the only major race or ethnic group in the United States that is majority immigrant. Some 54% of the 24 million Asian Americans living in the U.S. are immigrants, and among Asian adults, that share rises to 67%. Like, we've pretty hardcore gone after the Latino population, especially men. because they also voted against their own interests, being like, you knew what was coming. Because honestly, they thought that they would be a majority of us, and I say this as us as in like liberal or left leaning, knew that these types of bills, especially when it comes to immigration policies and ICE, they were targeting specific groups of people, and they're usually Latino or Muslim populations, and we've seen it. But for those who actually studied, and I know that's to our listeners, they already knew, this was going to affect everyone. And for many of the Asian people who voted against their own interests, again, like I think it wasn't 50%, but it was still too high. This should have been a warning sign that this would also affect them. And again, Georgia had the biggest sign, and it was sad and comical at the same time. So with numbers broken down like this, quote, Asian Americans trace their origins from all parts of Asia and make up a significant portion of the overall U.S. immigration population. 3 of the largest U.S. immigration population are from India at 2.8 million, China 2.5 million, and the Philippines at 2 million. And FYI, over 200,000 other immigrants are adoptees from different Asian countries. According to some research with the help of the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders Commissions, and Asian American adoptees, Kim Park Nelson was able to get some more specific numbers as of August of 2024. So they break it down like this. The largest group of adoptees are around 117,000 are from Korea. The second would be from China at 97,000. 10,000 from Vietnam, 10,000 from India, 7,000 from the Philippines, 3,000 from Taiwan, and 2,000 from Thailand. And with that, around 1,000 from Hong Kong. Going back to the overview, while researching the attitudes of Asian Americans and their immigrant families, most of the research has been from 2024, pre-Trump. Like it has to be stated. However, the stats are not glowing for the Asian American community, though it does show that 61% of Asian American voters went for Harris in the 2024 election. The percentage went down by 7% from the 2020 election. And seemingly every election cycle, the percentage continues to go down for left-leaning voters or for Democratic voters.
According to myasianvoice.com, the data shows Chinese Americans were the lowest in Democratic votes at 53%, which was a giant downfall from 2020, which showed 72% of votes for Biden. However, the Japanese American votes were higher for Harris than they were for Biden.
Right. One thing that many of the researchers have shown is that Asian Americans have slowly started to lean, again, more and more conservative. Of course, this was, again, most of the research in 2024. I think things may slightly shift as we've seen a lot more naturalized citizens, green card holders, visa holders from Asia, yes, the continent, being a part of this deportation sweep. So, in fact, some, like the attitudes of some of the other marginalized communities, believe the idea that if they do the things, quote, right, in the right way, then they are exempt from the conservative ideology of immigrants and fear-mongering of immigrants. With the crackdown against immigrants, both those who have worked to legally obtain citizenships and those who haven't, the amount of people being unlawfully picked up by ICE has become more and more frequent, with the government using the opportunity to spend more money to increase the profits of private equity. Yes, I think just as a reminder, when we have detention centers, they are privately owned. The contracts, they are privately owned. This is all equity. When we have contracts with, Uganda, this is a private capital venture, as a reminder. However, this new practice has dented some of the capitalist ventures, like the Hyundai plant that was projected to bring in lots of jobs and profits with the help of the South Korean deal in the state of Georgia. After they raided a newly built plant looking for a few immigrants, they crashed with their assault rifles, tactical gears, masks, and shackles, and very little identifiers, arresting around 475 people, shackling and detaining them with no due process. And I want to put this caveat here because I've been kind of really irritated in this narrative by South Korean people and South Korean immigrants or any Asian American people when they talk about this and being like, they were unduly processed. The amount of force that they use to find, quote unquote, a few of the undocumented, BT does, many of these people that are being hunted down, I guess for the lack of better terms, they are in the middle of getting their due process. They are in the middle of getting their citizenship. So abiding by showing up at courts, abiding by going to their dates. They are being everything they are meant to do. They are paying taxes. This level of like, they don't pay taxes. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And they don't receive any of the benefits for paying those taxes. It's still obnoxious that even if it was just 3 or 4 people, it still is a bad practice and still inhumane. Just to put that out there. It shouldn't be just because so many people from the good workers, as Trump would say, the high-skilled workers, as he had said. It should be said that if there were still the 3 or 4, we should all still be ashamed. So I want to put that caveat there because I'm tired of hearing, oh, just these South Koreans. Oh, no. What it did do is brought it into an international scale and brought it to the attention of people who hold money and ties to money. So that did help with that. But we should be upset that the original narrative was the 4 or 5. I know there's the woman in South Georgia who was running for Congress who thought she was doing something real big and then lied about the same, which we need to come back up to an episode of saying they were being trafficked, they're being enslaved. No, they're not. You are a liar. You are putting that same narrative that many conservative white women who want to clutch their pearls and say we have to save the children and women, and you tried to change that narrative into this when you figured out, oh, I just cost our country billions of dollars, specifically our state. That's a whole different episode. I'm very upset. Moving on. But with all of that, many who were present of the Korean workers, they did have visas. Now, some of these visas were incorrect. The paperwork was done incorrect. The H-1B visa program is very selective and very confusing, apparently, even for other governments to fill out for high-skilled labor, as they say. And I can't seem to get a number of how many were approved. Like, everything's going out the window because the back-and-forth narrative of who is wrong and right. And how many have been told to go ahead and go so they didn't slow down the possibility of opening the plant. The amount of, which actually happened, by the way, after all of this went down, Marco Rubio, as well as Trump, was like, why don't you stay? We promise we won't arrest you again. Not guaranteeing a visa, not guaranteeing the right paperwork. They just said, trust us, bro. Which is, I'm pretty sure how it started, by the way. Mm-hmm. Trust us, bro. We got you. Oh, my bad. Many of the sycophants have argued that the South Koreans were illegally here without the proper paperwork. Again, the trust me, bro happens a lot. All the while, Trump himself stated that the skilled workers were welcomed here and through the negotiations of Rubio enticed them to continue their work here with no actual efforts or guarantees that something like this wouldn't happen again. Again, it really was like, bro, promise. This time for sure. This time, no. No. You're the good ones. Mm-hmm. He really did say that.
Yeah.
I hate it here. Anyway, Governor Kemp of Georgia, who apparently was not aware of the raid, he's actually stated that he didn't know this was going to happen, has tried to quietly hide under the radar by not publicly speaking against the raid, as he just made quite a bit of money with the opening of the latest ICE detention centers here, but did make a trip to South Korea to try to smooth things over. Not sure how that went. There was a lot of photo ops.
Yeah.
But no actual progress. And I love the fact that he has not yet once made a statement, except for being like, I didn't know this, and then just travel to South Korea.
Yep. There are conversations of lawsuits coming from South Korea due to the inhumane treatment of their citizens while being detained by ICE in the U.S. However, as of October, it seems that there has been some agreement to allow for South Korean workers to continue their work, but no real changes, as PBS reports, saying this, quote, South Korea has called for more fundamental steps, such as creating a new visa category to expand access for skilled workers. But U.S. officials at the Washington meeting said major changes would be difficult because of legislative constraints, according to a statement from the South Korean ministry.
So literally, they don't care enough to fix it, but they're really still begging them to come.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and this is also at the same time that President Trump's administration, President Trump, is like, give me billions of dollars for you to open these factories.
Yeah.
From both Japan and South Korea. And both of them are like, what? What? Of course, this is after he gave billions to Argentina. What? Anyway. So the sentiments within South Korea has been pretty intense. As a country that is all about holding their officials accountable, they have overthrown and impeached many presidents successfully. Some have been assassinated. I don't think that's the citizens, but just saying. They have been quite loud about the treatment of their people, and the administration continues to not be held accountable for the distress of their people, which is why this lawsuit could happen, and it probably should, and would do some major things if it were to go forward. Of course, the tariffs and trade wars between the U.S. and other Asian countries have not made any of this better, which, not surprising. I have been on South Korean TikTok where they're continually making fun of the U.S., of Trump, and this specific woman in South Georgia. Like, they are going after her. They're being real mean. If you know anything about Korean netizens, they're mean.
Okay.
So, and it doesn't help that the administration has made the views on Asian Americans less favorable as well. According to the University of Washington, they have an article from the Asian American Foundation, which released a study in May of 2025, which showed that the U.S. views have not been great. So these are some of the key findings that they quote. The results reveal a lot regarding the perception of Asian Americans in the U.S., including 3 key findings. 40% of Americans think Asian Americans are more loyal to their country of origin than the U.S., and that's double of what it was in 2021. More than a quarter of Americans are concerned that Chinese Americans are a threat to U.S. society, especially when it comes to national security.
At the same time, worldwide, it seems that the U.S. may be falling out of favor, while China is starting to look real good. From some other Pew Research from July of 2025, they say this, quote, across 24 countries, Pew Research Center surveyed this spring, more people have a positive view of the United States than of China. However, this gap is closing as views of the U.S. have become more negative while views of China have turned more positive.
Right. So the increasing amount, like in percentage-wise, is changing pretty quickly, and they are starting to see China as possibly the better power or more power, especially when it comes to technology, in trade, and in labor, which is really scary for so many reasons because neither China or the U.S. are great. Let's just be very, very clear. They list Israel as one of the countries who definitely favor U.S. over China, but countries like Mexico, Canada, Indonesia, and several others, they seem to be going in their favorability to China. Mexico and Canada, I feel like that's self-explanatory, no?
I mean, everybody's suffering from what's happening in the United States right now, really. I mean, mostly, but Mexico and Canada, I do feel a particular... I'm so sorry.
To be fair, like, our administration has threatened war, like, with both of them.
It's
as
like
of
you're
late.
living with a roommate who has a disorder where every 4 years they completely...
They're like, we're going to take you. What? What are you saying right now? So, I mean, I don't think that's not too surprising. I will say, from what we can gather, many of the Asian areas are all about China. That has increased. As once upon a time, that wasn't the case. So yes, with the likes of blaming Asian people for COVID and the rise of Asian hate, it isn't hard to see that within the Asian communities, there's also some divisiveness. I mean, obviously, when we have this conversation about the Republican Democrats, the voting split, like the fact that it's so close is upsetting in itself. But something that has been annoying the hell out of me is this conversation of the Oxford study. So for those of you who have never heard of it, and I wish I was you. We're going to talk about the study. So in the study, this specific quote, which is being used a lot more so in TikTok than anywhere else, I think it has now gone over to Instagram and such, is loosely referencing a study completed in 2010 that was titled The New Susie Wong, Narrative Assumptions of White Male and Asian Female Relationships. And these were done by Asian women, I believe. So from joysauce.com, quote, this study examines romantic relationships between white men and Asian women using the context set by the 1960 film, The World of Susie Wong. According to the study, it's generally believed that this film set the stereotypical standard of naive subservience paired with hypersexuality that follows Asian women in Western world, especially when in relation to the white men that seek them out. Essentially, it was a report about fetishizing of Asian women in the early film industry's portrayal of women, Asian women, in, again, the film industry. The article goes on to say this. The study concludes that the stereotypical Susie Wong-esque representation of Asian females when associated romantically with white men has become internalized and normalized. So it's talking about the fact that this was really bad, especially when we see and portray Asian women, and it still happens today as being that subservient, pretty much mail order bride conversation. So we're thinking, like, especially with that conversation of like war-torn world and war-made bride, where the soldier goes overseas to an Asian country, takes a wife and brings her back, and because she is so out of her realm, that all she can do is worship the white man. But this has turned into, oh, this is all Asian women. Correct. But as of late, many have used the term Oxford study as a way to denigrate any Asian woman who is dating a white person. I will say I have seen people try to use this term in reverse, as a reverse Oxford study when it's an Asian man with white women. That hasn't stuck, but I've seen people try it. I will say that. Which is odd, because the majority of people using this phrase are actually Asian men, or those who are hiding behind a digital Asian mask, kind of, like, you know what I'm saying, like pretending they're Asian themselves. But this current trend has really shown the persistent need to sexualize and fetishize Asian women, at the same time using it in the most misogynistic ways possible. Literally, most of the comments are only under Asian women influencers. And the minute they find out that there's a white person as their partner, that is full of it. It is completely, I will say they also have added comfort women as a term. For South Koreans, that is one of the most offensive things you could do because the history of it is so sensitive and it still has yet to be resolved. This with the added outdated study of how most men prefer Asian women, which again is a part of the stereotype of Asian women being sexualized, infantilized, and subjugated.
Back to the Joy Sauce article, quote, TikTok scholars have been digging into other data from dating apps, including one creator who recently did a deep dive into an article published by the Daily Mail in 2013. Amongst a plethora of potentially outdated race-focused dating app data, this article stated that most men prefer Asian women, with the exception of Asian men. Though both studies are now more than 10 years old, their impact on the current relationship zeitgeist is still holding strong and often encourages misplaced blame for the emasculation of Asian men on Asian women, as clearly evidenced by the Men's Rights Asians movement. It became clear that members of the community see Asian women as playing an active role in maintaining the stereotypes placed on Asian men. They often contended that choosing non-Asian partners means undermining and emasculating Asian men, therefore perpetuating white supremacy.
It's a wonderful form of gaslighting.
Yeah,
to be honest.
It's your fault, for sure.
Right. Oh, and yeah, we've talked a bit about the feminist movement in South Korea and the men's rights groups there, which have caused a small movement like the 4B movement that has gained a lot of popularity around the world, including here in the U.S. And we're not saying that South Korea's 4B movement is the reason for the decline of the birth rate everywhere. I think it just finally was named as like, yeah, fine, yeah, okay, yeah. Because we have seen a huge decline in South Korea, in Japan, in the U.S., and so many more other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's Asian women's fault for that too. Again, the comment is seemingly innocent, but the usage is poignant and purposeful. From a Guardian article written by Steffi Cowell, she writes this: the submissive sexualized perception of Asian women persists. They are stereotyped by demeaning depictions of mail-order brides and comfort women and eroticized in waifu art. misogynistic memes about Asian women in interracial relationships abound online, including Oxford study. These are layered comments that show both a hate and disdain for women who choose to date non-Asian men. It's something that has to be studied, and it only perpetuates the lessening of Asian women's humanity.
Right. Back to Cal's article, quote, much of this misogyny is nurtured within Men's Rights Asian, MRA Asians, groups online, which organize harassment campaigns towards Asian women who date non-Asian people. The group's ire stems from another racist stereotype with repercussions in the dating realm, that Asian men are emasculated and unattractive. Asian men were revealed as one of the least swiped-on racial groups in a 2014 OkCupid report. Much of the recent derogatory language around the dating habits of Asian women has been coined in the MR Asians space WMAF, or a white male Asian female relationship. Lu, an Asian woman who rejects Asian men in favor of white men, Bananarang, an Asian woman who used to date white men but now seeks a relationship with an Asian man.
Now, with the popularity and the rise of K-pop and like K-dramas, C-dramas, J-pop, I think things are probably going to be shifting because they've become a new fixation on Asian men, which is wonderful. Again, this comes back to gaslighting Asian women. It's your fault that we don't have a relationship. Like, it is a new form of incel. Like, it's racial now. Again, I talked about this before when we talked about online dating. I rarely got hit on by a lot of Asian men. I will say that. But I just remember one incident in which the dude, this is his way of like trying to get my attention instead of just saying, hey, I like your picture. Hey, that's a cute dog, because I always featured a dog probably. But instead, he immediately started with, I know you're probably not going to come talk to me because you probably date only white men because you won't even give me a chance. Like, that was the immediate...
The opening statement.
That was the opening. I was like, wow. Well, definitely not going to talk to you now because I'm scared of you. Like, I'm immediately scared. But there is this heaviness to that conversation, especially when we see Oxford. Like, the part that gets me with people commenting, of course there's trolls, there's always going to be trolls, it's that level of like, did you even know them? I didn't reject you. Right. I don't know you. What is this? What is this new level of disdain for someone happy in a relationship? And there's a whole different conversation when we talk about interracial dating. It may be outlawed soon because we are seeing a slippery slope of things to come. So MR Asians, you're about to be real happy, I guess. I don't know.
Probably not.
Exactly. But there's so many things in this conversation. And the amount of like times that I have seen the comment Oxford study makes me so angry because it comes back to stereotyping and dehumanizing Asian women again, which you're like, we would make it so many progressive steps. And now we're back here with just one statement. And yeah, actually, the researchers for the actual Oxford studies, which has nothing to do with this necessarily, has said, like, no, this was never our intent. What is happening? This is actually the opposite of what we wanted. As well as the fact that the origination was some random dude saying there needs to be an Oxford study because he saw a happy couple who was an Asian woman with a white man about women like her. So it wasn't even really in referencing to that study. But there is an absolute belief that it's a real study, too.
Yeah. Oh, it feels kind of like the Mandela effect where everybody's like, I know, I remember this happened.
This is a study. No, that's not what you think it is.
Nope.
But there's a lot, again, so much more in conversation that we talk about. I didn't even talk about the fact that there's plenty of naturalized Asian students who are getting their citizenship revoked based on who they are protesting for. The fact that our naturalization status could be revoked based on whether or not the government thinks that we are a threat. We haven't even talked about the LGBTQ to it all and how that is another layer in this intersectional conversation of what we see every day. Like I said, the Asian community is a giant community, and for us to ignore the things that are happening in the U.S. is absurd. But at the same time, I understand for those of us who don't feel stable and are scared, are trying to figure out how to best walk this line of trying to seek justice and advocacy versus self-preservation, or with self-preservation, I guess, not versus. And in that conversation of like, yes, I'm glad South Korea got a wake-up call to understand the U.S. is not about you. But at the same time, that it had to get to that model minority conversation in order to see and highlight the awful treatment and inhumane treatment that the U.S. policies have put onto other people. There's a lot. There's so much happening, again, with this topic alone. And honestly, Annie, I refuse to do a two-parter again. I'm trying my best.
Okay.
So we'll end it here. But I fully expect we will have many more conversations about this in the future, as long as we have this job.
Yep. Yep. Well, listeners, as always, we would love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts about this or any resources, always appreciated. You can email us at hello@stuffmonevertoldyou.com. You can find us on Blue Sky at Mom Stuff Podcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff One Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have some new merchandise at Cotton Bureau, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your favorite shows.